Hello, dears. Good morning, lovers in literature. Today we will discuss a poem entitled The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. Robert Frost, the American greatest poet of 20th century, born in 1874 and died in 1963. As a matter of fact, in literature, he is known for his unique style, and that is the realism and the portraying of the countryside in the life of nature. When we come to today's poem, Road Not Taken, it this poem written in 1915 and published in 1916 in the poetry collection of Frost Mountain Interval. And when we come to basically to the background of this poem, certain critics or literary document prove that this poem, as William Wordsworth, the Solitary Reaper, when poet wrote a letter to his friend about the glory of the nature. But later on, how when a friend went through the content of that prose, that letter, and exclaimed, "Wow, what prose! That is the stamp of the poetry," and later on, a poet turned that in a poem. Likewise, here, background to this poem is he had a friend, Edward Thomas, great poet of England. During poet stayed in England, close friend to him, and Edward in World War First had been the soldier. So he generally used to complain against the life. Several complaints, regrets taking the life, and mockingly in the subtle irony, in the mocking way, he wrote to his friend. Means Frost wrote to his friend Edward. But later on, this individual writing, individual verse proved and not only proved the best poetry, reflective poem, and the motivational one. When we come to this poem to discuss, it is very essential to know it structurally and thematically. Generally, I say that whenever one goes through the text, these two characteristics, these two tools to study poetry, be did and be known. And today, as we discussing this poetry, then it is very essential to know basic structural or thematic so that very easily we can understand and can answer inch by inch any question. Structurally, this poem consists 20 lines, four stanzas. Each stanza runs with five lines. That means it runs in a iambic, iambic meter. But here, generally, the iambic pentameter for the purpose of 10 syllables in the poetry. That is the basic one. But particularly in this poem, with the iambic meter, poet uses a tetra. And basically, as a student in literature, everyone should know what means a tetra, what means a penta, and here tetra means 8 syllables and 4 feet. Here tetrameter runs in iambic, and iambic means unstaged and staged. Unstaged and staged, but this is also broken by Robert Frost as a modern poet. And modernists are the interrogative one. And their interrogation is that poetry should be very free from the style and a trend and a traditions. So here he applies Anapest. Anapest with the tetrameter means iambic pentameter. He applies Anapest. And when you will deal the Anapest, will realize if you go on other our video, you will have the clear cut explanation. Here, rhyme scheme or rhyme relating to this poem, then A B A A B. It runs throughout in these four stanzas. And when we try to operate this poem structurally, literary figures, then literary figures very first throughout the text, very first when we try to deal the title itself punning, metaphoric and symbolic. That means pun, metaphor, symbol, personification, alliteration, assonance, consonance, enjambment, antithesis, paradox. So such literary figures have been applied in this poem. Thematically, when we come to this poem, thematically, these four stanzas are divided into two sections. First, second, and third, thematically, the very first one, and the fourth, that is the second one. These three stanzas thematically are descriptive, and the last one, fourth, it is reflective. When we try to go through the text of these four stanzas, here poem basically it's the universal theme, and this teaches about the human choices, how in the world human being at the choices of career confused. When we start to deal the very first stanza, poet here represents himself a traveler, and as a traveler, when he starts to think having the sight, countryside scenes and sceneries in the yellow wood, he himself finds confused. And there are two roads. Which one be taken? That is the question for the traveler. And here life has been metaphorically presented. That life itself a puzzle. either the career or the individual decision when we try to take. That is not so easy. It is very very difficult, as poet here mentions. Two roads diverge in yellowwood. That means in that forest, when poet, it was the autumn season and he found two roads. Now ultimately, and sorry, I couldn't travel both. That means poet finds himself confused which road is to be taken. And it is the question, it is the problem to be solved relating to the life. Here poet ultimately indirectly as a philosopher wants to preach that life itself a very difficult one, very tough one. As very earlier in Shakespeare's drama, Shakespeare has proved that life a tale told by an idiot. So here also in Hindi, when we try to understand or say, that means here title is very significant. Title is very suggestive. Title is very symbolical. Title is very punning. Road. Generally, dictionary meaning is the path, but here it isn't. Road means the life, career, and he further says, and be one traveler long I stood. To be a traveler, I thought for a while to where it bent in the undergrowth. And I found that at the long side, under the bushes and the plants, this road, this path misplaced and disappeared before him. So then took the other, just as a fair and having perhaps the better claim. The question is which one is the better? Which one is to be traveled? Which one is to be taken? That is the question. And in general life, poet means here philosophically, poet wants that in the life such opportunities in the eyes of the traveler may be the problem, but these are the opportunities standing before such fellows. And it is very difficult to have decision, and not only decision, when the people go through the easy one, those who want comfort zone of the life, they travel after the others. But here, being very awareful, being very conscious and aware fellow one to the life, poet here wants to say that having perhaps the better claim because it was grassy and wanted where. The other way that war to be wed means less traveled on that, and perhaps poet thinks perhaps it wanted to be traveled means to be taken, though age for that the passing there had warned them really about the same. And one thing also, poet is enjambed at the mind. Poet is confused totally having as the people. And here as a traveler, poet is only the representative of the word. It's not in the real life of the poet. A poet very significantly speaking, taking the word, that what the condition and what the situation of the word to decide for the career. and relating this theme to the learners or the students either at the school or college level. When we are at the fork of the career, we are confused and jammed. There stands ambiguity. And ambiguity, there the decision power goes generally paralyzed and parallelly follow the others. In third, and both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden back. In morning, when poet observes very keenly, then he found also these both paths parallel means same. There was nothing wrong with individually in particular, as the single one was total and the other was less. But in the opinion of a poet wants to say that both were equal. But it depends on, oh, I kept the first or another day, yet knowing how way leads on the way, I doubted if I should ever come back. One thing poet also clears that decisions made, decisions done in life never returns. A mistake committed at a time can't be repented again. Means relating to career. Once a step wrong one can't be repented. So here poet says that he was very confused and he realized at the realization. And when we deal the textual and the thematical this poem, I think you have gone through so in other classes or in the reference of Robert Frost. Robert Frost other poems, apple picking, birches, bending wall, and stopping by snowy woods evening. These are such poems are dealing the great theme relating to the practical life. That is the universally runs with the universal theme or the philosophical viewpoint. At last, the fourth stanza, that is the reflective one. And here poet says, I shall be telling this with a sigh. Here also when poet uses a sigh, sigh dictionary is in the negation negative word. But here poet means I would tell to the word, I would reveal to the word somewhere edges and edges hands to roads diverged in a wood and eye. Here means how poet was confused, having chosen, having a choice to the career, which path is to be taken, and he would clear to the world. I took the one less traveled by. And he would preach, he would say, poet says through this that how he chose the second one that less traveled. And that has made all the difference, and that made all the difference. And why he just so. Poet here, poet and not only the poet but the well known. When poet chose, probably he wants to say that in the creation of literature, how he himself established and how he earned the name and fed abroad. That means the decision depends on individual personality. and we need not to follow others. As in life, generally we say in Hindi, generally as a philosophic, the Hindi writer says, लोगों का काम है, लोगों का काम है, या फिर हमारा काम है लोगों के बारे में सोचें, क्या कहेंगे लोग। नहीं, बिल्कुल नहीं। जिंदगी के बारे में हमें हमारा स्वयं का डिसीजन लेना है। फील्ड्स दोज यू प्रेफर on the basis of your own consciousness, on the basis of your own conclusion. As poet remains very confused in very opening stanzas, and the last poet finds very equal both these ways, and takes very intellectually, very consciously the decision which he had to take, and that made him universal. He would give the message to the world. That means this poem leaves such a great philosophy and motivational message. I think it is enough, but it will be very beneficial when line to line we deal in classroom, and each word not possible to be discussed in such lecture approaches in teaching. Even I tried my best, and it will be very beneficial either structurally or thematically or textual stanzas. That is enough. I think it's very beneficial if you go very seriously through this discussion or lecture. I thank you for watching and meet you in next video.